Oh, and on that note, I have not seen people anywhere in all my travels more terrified by their government than Torontonians, except perhaps in Vancouver. And this includes the denizens of the almost equally woke as Canada states of New York and
I don't want to, first person Andy this, but I live in Vancouver, and no, there is not an overwhelming sense of, sentiment of people who are terrified 24/7 by their government. A lot of them often, and this is the same with most places, think about government incompetence, for example, but it's mostly, the far right and the anti-vax crowd who are really doing this whole Canada is communist now, and this is like an authoritarian state, and Trudeau is the new Stalin. That's a very specific group.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, so if y'all don't know, Jordan Peterson very recently has been kind of going, well, he's been trying to go full Red Skull. And if you don't know that reference, and I'm not talking about the Marvel character himself or the kind of fascist connotations of the character, but I'm talking about the fact that there was a comic book that kind of related Red Skull to Jordan Peterson. He got so mad about it and so confused. He was like, all I want to do is help people. I don't understand how anyone could ever say this about me. And then because people just kept going with it, he really rolled into the whole memes about it, and then started actually selling like merch on his store, like Red Skull shit, like branding with the fascist comic book character. Cool and normal stuff. But now, ever since this whole like Elliot Page arc, he has been on just a campaign to do all these evil villain like speeches. But because it's Jordan Peterson, and he's so ridiculous and says things like, bucko, up yours, clean your room, and things like that, the whole thing comes across, and it's like a full motion video villain. Like, if you ever know about the video game era, where things jump from cartridges to CDs, we got ourselves, the Sega CD, and then everyone thought it would be a great idea to put really shitty movies, like, Z-list movies into video games and try to make them interactive. That's where you get games like Night Trap and Sewer Shark and stuff like that. And like, the acting was just always laughably bad, and it was grainy and stuff like that. Like, that's what he genuinely comes across right now.
I recently wrote an article for Canada's National Post about the Canadian domestic situation, which I'm going to read to you today. I'm reading some articles on my YouTube channel.
Like this brilliant meme.
Building captured. Incoming transmission.
Conscript report. Moving out. Ready, cop.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Extraction complete.
Precisely. Oh man, on point.
Partly because on more difficult issues, I can't speak extemporaneously with enough degree of precision, especially for things where I'm pushing my limits conceptually. And so now and then I'm going to read something, and that's the reason. So this is entitled Reflections on the Sorry State of Canada.
Oh God.
I've had the great privilege of traveling to 40 American cities in just about as many states, and to 15 European countries in the last 4 months. In the waning days of the great COVID panic, and I've learned many things about our great and self-conscious nation. First, I have not traveled anywhere else where the citizens and the government are more neurotically and fascistically concerned about the pandemic. It may have escaped Canadians' notice, but virtually nowhere else in the civilized world is it now required to wear a mask, as it is still mandatory, damn us, in Canada's airports and on flights out of our benighted country.
So I don't know if he traveled to any of these countries while he was on his European tour. Austria, Cyprus, Estonia, Germany, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, the Netherlands, Portugal, or Spain. But if he did, he would have seen that all those countries still have the mask mandates in the airports and the airplanes.
There is absolutely no excuse for this, except the punitive and appalling self-righteousness of the Trudeau Liberals. What else might you expect, however, from a government that also includes Chrystia Freeland, a deputy prime minister, who has literally bragged about her colleagues' appalling performance on the economic front, claiming that it is actually good and meet for Canadians to empty their wallets at the gas pumps so that the climate emergency, which simply does not exist, see Bjorn Lomberg's expert analysis, stays...
Wait, what? He's going full climate change denialism too? It doesn't exist? I mean, maybe I'm assuming this whatever mansion villa you're living in, Dr. Peterson, is incredibly nicely air conditioned. But maybe if you opened that door handle behind you and stepped outside before recording the segment, you might notice something that's going on.
First and foremost, in their all too careless, by liberal standards, consciences. I simply cannot believe that this.
By the way, I'm not going to say I agree with Jordan Peterson, but criticisms of Chrystia Freeland are completely and totally valid and based.
Absolute failure of economic policy is now being trumpeted as a positive accomplishment. How daring, how appalling, how manipulative, how miraculous. Here's a hint for you saintly progressives.
Okay.
If you cared about the poor at all, the real poor, not the hypothetical poor you are hypothetically saving in the future, you would do virtually nothing but expend effort to drive down the cost of energy. Energy, which is precisely equivalent to work, and therefore to the wealth that ameliorates poverty.
So, I mean, I'm not down with lowering the cost of energy. There's a multitude of ways you can go about it responsibly that's not going to accelerate or exacerbate climate change. But I'm guessing that's not what you're talking about here, Doctor. I'm assuming you want to drill, baby, drill.
Second, it is almost impossible to overstate the degree to which Canada's international reputation has been damaged by the childish and ill-advised actions of our juvenile WEF marionette of a prime minister. The Americans I have talked to and with, including people very well placed politically on the Democratic and Republican front alike,
Give us
listen
names.
in open-mouthed and disbelieving amazement when I recount the claim brought forth by the Trudeau Liberals and their hired Canadian Broadcasting Corporation bootlickers that the trucker freedom convoy was financed by Americans, hell-bent on bringing about a January 6th.
That's empirically true. The overwhelming amount of donations came from American accounts. Like, okay, all right.
Style insurrection in Ottawa. Who would benefit from that? Even in principle. Even
if they're demanding to have Justin Trudeau forcibly removed from office or resign, I'm assuming that's the whole point of this video, isn't it? I'm assuming people who despise him.
If the American Republican MAGA types, cared about us, which they don't, why in the world would they want to destabilize Canadian democracy?
They think they're restoring it. Like the people at the January 6th coup thought they were saving the country. That's the problem here. What?
What's the motive? To justify the crime? There is none.
It was all over right-wing media. They absolutely adored the trucker rally. They thought that this was a march towards freedom and that, workers were taking back their country. And they were going to do it by getting freedom. No more vaccine mandates, no more health measures, no more masks, no more social distancing, which was already starting to all erode naturally in Canada. And then get Justin Trudeau to resign in disgrace. And then we just hold an impromptu election, ideally for a far-right conservative.
Period. Do you understand, Canadians? Even the American Democrats think that idea is insane. And a non-trivial proportion of Canadians seemed willing to buy the story, despite its demonstrable, factual falseness. Remember the CBC retraction, buried in obscurity? And preposterousness. Because the alternative was the truly painful realization that the governmental institutions and the legacy media organizations that served us well and faithfully in the center and on the left and right for 150 years have now become fundamentally incompetent, untrustworthy,
fake news,
self-serving, collusionist, and corrupt. It's easier for too many smug and blind Northerners to swallow the line instead that madmen, MAGA Trumpists want to destabilize what is, after all, their biggest trading partner and most stable and reliable ally. To believe that Confederate admiring truckers, and is there more than a single one of those, are working in concert with the evil orange-haired demon who once ruled the US.
No one was suggesting that. There's like, you're making up this conspiracy theory. They weren't in direct collusion with each other. You understand that people can finance things that they think further their own interests or further their own goals. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you understand that. It doesn't need to get into this whole thing that they were directly colluding with Trump and or with some kind of, MAGA center and they were broadcasting it. No, it was just something that was happening and getting amplified, and especially amplified by right-wing media, and was getting mischaracterized heavily because guess what? The founding people of that rally weren't even truckers themselves, and the vast majority of truckers opposed the occupation. The vast majority of truckers and trucker unions and just unions in general in this country, workers, they all opposed it.
And even worse, is Prime Minister Trudeau so daft and deluded that he failed to notice that these same MAGA terrorists are going to utterly shellac the hapless Democrats this coming fall and take the presidency in 2024? And that we will then have to talk, trade, and otherwise consort with them, as they are the perennial elephant on our doorstep, and that burning all bridges in that direction with casual derogation and outright lies might not be particularly politic? And
wait, so do you want Justin Trudeau to come out and just say like glorifying amazing things about QAnon? You want to go there? We as Canadians may not agree on everything, but we respect the QAnoners and their pursuit of those who consume the adrenochrome, the sweet, delicious adrenochrome that runs in the veins of children. So we believe that while we do not think that this is entirely accurate, we respect their drive.
the unfortunate answer to that question is clearly, yes, the Honorable Mr. Trudeau is precisely that: pretentious, presumptuous, careless, uninformed, daft, and deluded. But after all,
Keep going.
in his own words, he doesn't bother himself with such trivialities as, quote, monetary policy, end quote. Third, on the international front, I have had extensive discussions with political and cultural figures in the UK, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Romania, Hungary, Estonia, Albania, Austria, Croatia, Slovenia, Poland, and Serbia. And I know for a fact, from first-hand communication, that Canada has hurt itself very badly on the reputational front with the derisive dismissal of the trucker convoy, which is...
Like, I am assuming if you're talking to far-right figures in other countries, yeah, they probably equally hate it. And have like,
similar
bought into all these lies that all of you are spreading about this.
for movements in other countries, most notably the US and the Netherlands, with the imposition of the Emergencies Act, and most signally, with the seizure of private bank accounts without due process, or any pesky process at all. Perhaps Canadians are trying to downplay the significance of all of this, because we are in some state of shock after all the COVID authoritarianism, which we have not yet sloughed off. Oh, and on that note, I have not seen people anywhere in all my travels more terrified by their government than Torontonians, except perhaps in Vancouver. And this includes the denizens of the almost equally woke as Canada states of New York and...
I don't want to, first person Andy this, but I live in Vancouver, and no, there is not an overwhelming sense of sentiment of people who are terrified 24/7 by their government. They, a lot of them often, and this is the same with most places, think about government incompetence, for example, but it's mostly, the far right and the anti-vax crowd who are really doing this whole Canada is communist now, and this is like an authoritarian state, and Trudeau is the new Stalin. That's a very specific group.
California. Everyone outside is
Am I Torontonian? No, I am a Vancouverite.
asking, just what in hell is going on in the great white north? And not,
The only one directly scared of Canadian government are Indigenous. Hey, that is really fucking true. All right, the Wet'suwet'en have every reason to be terrified by the government. Like white passing people like myself, everyday Canadians who are like thinking about vaccine mandates. Like that's an inconvenience. Okay, it's like, oh, I can't go to the restaurants that I love all the time. Or no, I can't go. They're not letting me in to eat all my tasty brunch. Can't have that. this is basically apartheid. This is basically the Holocaust. That's what's happening. We have a separate system here. Yeah, oh, I have to wear a mask, and the mask is itchy. I don't like wearing the mask. I only have to wear it a little bit of time because I've got a job that's actually not a frontline working job, or I don't work in construction or something like that, so I don't have to wear my mask all the time. But man, it's so itchy. And social distancing. This is Stalin. This is communism. This is Russia. It's happening. Meanwhile, like, the Wet'suwet'en people are actually having violence enacted upon them. State-sponsored violence enacted upon them.
Without true sorrow. Our country was for many years, despite its rather small population and its general insignificance in the larger scheme of things, a beacon of both possibility and stability. A remarkable example of what a tolerant modern democracy might be.
By the way, if any of you, you're watching from other parts of the world and you often hear about things like American exceptionalism, Canadian exceptionalism, like most things that emulate America, is in its own way, you know, very nationalistic, but it's also boring and kind of odd. And it's usually about how, like, well, we are this incredible multicultural society, and we're also really, really good at the whole oil thing. So we got that. And on top of which, you know, we believe in freedom. So that's good. We don't really have an identity. It's kind of hard when, you know, you're a combination of colonial genocide and some other things. And then plus we've got America like directly beside us. And then America is just, I mean, it's always popping off. So we don't really know what to do outside of compare ourselves continuously to America. That maple syrup, there's the maple syrup, don't forget about that.
A place where people from multiple cultures could thrive, and a staid, sober, but also sporadically interesting and creative place. And now, we're shell-shocked sheep ruled.
I edited parts of this, by the way, and this part, when I first saw it, made me laugh so much. Check this out. I just started editing a whole bunch of the parts together because it was funnier that way.
Or we're shell-shocked sheep ruled by a poser. WTF. Really? And please excuse the elevated voice. Or that all the data on
like pre-watch Andy. No, I didn't pre-watch the whole thing because I like actually reacting in real time. What I did is, if you have Adobe Premiere, you can push the button L. Here's a little tip for you people. You push the L button and then it fast forwards. If you push it a second time, it fast forwards super fast. So I was literally just sitting there and he was like, and then I got to like a part where you'd be like, and I was like, oh shit, that looks fucking hilarious. Or he's like, I was like, well, that looks really funny too. And just put the clips together.
by a poser with the maturity of a teenager and the temperament of a Hollywood D-list celebrity.
Oh, how will Trudeau recover from this?
And because 3 catastrophes are not enough, here's an additional diverse, to use a hated word, selection. Pepper.
Hated by you. Yeah, okay. It's not a hated word by me. I kind of love diversity, but sure.
With some questions. How have Canadians failed to realize that our government holds them and our racist country utterly in contempt? That Mr. Trudeau.
By the way, he didn't suddenly become based there. He's not saying racist because he's just like, oh, well, I just want to acknowledge Canada's racist history. He's talking about the way that he feels liberals in this country try to acknowledge some parts of this history of our country.
Trudeau believes that his God-given mission is to elevate the consciousness of his citizens instead of serving their interests economically and practically. That the Trudeau Liberals are...
I don't fully disagree with certain points there. There's certainly something to be made that, you know, Justin Trudeau does a lot of work for massive corporations in this country. And rather than, again, meeting the needs of people, you'll usually find programs in Canada that have successfully helped people out, say like CERB or other programs come because they're getting pushback from Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, who are a little further to the left, the Soc Dems, trying to get these kind of systems in place that'll actually help people, you know, that whole thing. What politicians are supposed to do.
Perfectly willing to make us all poor, miserable, and demoralized, just to utterly fail in his efforts to save the planet. That the agents of that party and government are, as previously noted, perfectly willing and eager to trumpet that aim, which can be easily attained through the wretched combination of incompetence and moral Machiavellianism that characterizes the Trudeauites as a moral accomplishment. that we could be the freest, richest, cleanest country in the world.
See, here's the thing. I don't mind the fact that liberals are on the right side of a lot of issues when it comes to saying, hey, by the way, there is things like systemic racism and systemic oppression. And, maybe we should acknowledge that, gay people shouldn't be oppressed. Trans people shouldn't be oppressed. That is all good. What I find they don't do is actually address the material needs of these groups and try to end these systems of hierarchy itself. That's where liberals don't go nearly far enough. They kind of
but that we are trying hard
perpetuate
to
it
be
and
none
reinforce
of
it.
those three. That we are dividing ourselves among racial lines that are more germane to the US, just to ape the very progressive radicals whose idiot policies on the American
Ooh, weird choice of words there.
front
But what are you talking
are dooming
about?
the Democrats to what appears to be the worst electoral defeat they have experienced in at least 50 years. That all the data on the environmental front indicates that the fastest way to improve the ecosystems on which we all depend is to make people richer, not poorer, and to do that with good old capitalism. So they have the luxury to think about the long run and the habitat of their children. And I have, as of yet, said nothing about additional issues, such as Bill C-11, which is perhaps...
He's implying racism is a US issue. Yeah, he's done that before too. I've actually seen conservatives in Canada do that, where they're like, racism doesn't exist in Canada, okay? Maybe, I'll grant you there is some stuff that looks a little fucked up about what the US is doing, but I mean, Canada solved that.
the most appalling piece of legislation currently on the books. And that's a tough competition on the Canadian scene right now, which renders virtually every internet content provider in the world subject to the rules that should not even still govern the CBC and CTV, despite their use of scarce public airwaves, and which will make the rules regulating the net in Canada the most absurd and restrictive.
Ooh, that's something I actually agree with the right in Canada on, is that I don't want them to see and apply the CRTC rules to internet companies, because they are selling it as this idea where it's like, hey, by the way, if we do this thing, it's going to let us do what we do to radio and TV, which is promote Canadian content. I don't know if you know this in Canada, but 33% of all the songs you hear on the radio have to be Canadian. That's one of the regulations. And so on its surface, it's like, okay, you're going to help try to foster and build up indie YouTube accounts, indie Twitch streamers. That'll be neat. That's actually a really noble thing. I mean, there's a lot of small streamers that could use that kind of a boost, and it always turns out no, it's to promote the Justin Biebers. It's to promote The Weeknd. It's to promote people who are already very commercially viable and successful
In the free and perhaps the unfree world, or the appalling fact of the massive and continuing subsidization of the rapidly failing legacy media. Are you listening, CBC executives? By a government that only requires that the recipients of that largesse parrot back every foolish falsehood and lie uttered by the mad executive branch of our reprehensible government.
Okay, so I'm starting to understand why they're like convincing people like Joe Rogan that Canada is communist, even though it is the furthest thing from communism. The idea being that the CBC, which is a publicly funded network, which has its own team of journalists and all that kind of stuff, they're kind of operating, in his opinion, like Russian state media, as in they're taking their commands directly from the Canadian government to put spins on things rather than working independently from the government as they are purported to be and or do.
Or the fact that because of COVID, WTF, really? Parliament has essentially been suspended for yet another year. Or that we are pursuing an energy policy generated by low-resolution thinking, Marxism-addled ideologues.
I didn't know that. Canada. You've been accelerating all your tar sands oil production, just destroying the environment, but that was actually Marxist? I didn't know. Wow, I'm learning things.
That will not only impoverish our populace by making energy unreasonably expensive. Have you noticed, Canadians, when you fill up your unnecessary vehicles at the pump? But that will...
Oh, that was Trudeau. Trudeau's doing that to us. Ah, damn him. Damn him. Trudeau does it to us. Biden does it to you Americans. Fuck.
Only increase the probability that countries such as China will have to rely on coal to produce electricity instead of accessing, say, our plentiful natural gas. And that will therefore make...
Do you think natural gas is like carbon neutral? Well, it sounds better, right? It has the word natural in it, so it sounds clean.
the carbon dioxide burden borne by the atmosphere greater instead of lesser. And just last week, and in the aftermath of the Dutch farmer protests, that we are trying to reduce the absolute levels of the greenhouse gas nitrous oxide produced by those who grow our crops. That's food, folks, regardless of the amount of those crops produced in consequence. And we're doing that by threat and force, shades of COVID policy, instead of working with the farmers to find mutually acceptable and truly sustainable economic and environmental solutions. And that we're pursuing these policies in a world.
You see what I mean? Full motion video villain, you know, at best. It's funny that he was saying that Trudeau was like a D-list actor, because like, goddamn, this is just straight out of one of those games.
Where starvation in the near future in many countries is not only a likelihood, but a virtual certainty. Or the incomprehensible insistence by Jagmeet Singh, sworn enemy of the real working man,
pronounced Jagmeet,
that the proper role of the socialist NDP is to indefinitely prop up Trudeau's...
Oh, I wish they were socialists. You got them reversed, though. Social democrats. You're thinking democratic socialists. You got them in the wrong order.
Government, despite the fact that there seems to be nothing in it at all for Singh's party. Not even the cabinet position that a competent negotiator could have at least requested. As
still pushing this like, Jagmeet got cucked. He didn't get anything. He's propping up the liberals and he's getting nothing in return. I mean, if that dental program can be effectively initiated, that's a really huge win. There was a lot of things in that agreement that I was like, whoa, those are like key campaign issues that they've been talking about for a long time. But again, does remain to be seen.
Compensation for the sacrifice of his soul. Or the fact that our judiciary must now be staffed by people who must, or else, swear fealty to the DIE ideology that has devastated universities and is now working its way through many blind and careless corporations. That we are, in consequence, producing and permanently instantiating a generation of activist judges who regard as their role...
Okay,
not the
come on. That wasn't a full spit take, but that was close. I definitely was, oh my God. I didn't know he was going to or me right afterwards. It's either or and one of the two. And or
responsibility of abiding carefully by rule of law and precedent, but usurping what should be legislative action so that they can improve the world more efficiently than mere parliament, with its lack of Chinese Communist Party efficiency, might manage. Or the fact that the OECD has predicted that Canada will have the worst growth prospects of the major industrial societies for the next 4 decades. Please excuse the elevated voice, but good God. The worst? And for 4 decades? I believe that the federal Liberals have run the most incompetent administration in Canadian history. That they have not yet done all the terrible damage that they are going to do. That Canadians will not wake to the reality of the situation, because an awakening at that level requires a level of conceptual restructuring and consequent emotional trauma that we have never been called on before to manifest. And that Trudeau's idiosyncratic combination of willfully blind ignorance, moral pretension, and narcissistic self-aggrandizement is so toxic that it borders on, if does not cross the line, into outright treason. And the situation with Singh might, if anything, be worse. He is as dangerously incompetent and immaturely narcissistic as Trudeau, without even being simultaneously canny enough to capitalize personally or professionally on his delusional pretensions. Trudeau's government has been racked by scandals, each one severe enough to justify the dissolution of Parliament under normal conditions, so numerous that it is almost impossible to recover from the shock of the presently revealed misbehavior quick enough to process the next. And we could have 4 more years of this, particularly if the damnable Singh continues to ambulate miraculously without a spine, something physiologically impossible, but apparently simultaneously possible on the political and conceptual front. This is not good, Canadians. we not only look like fools to our great American allies and internationally, and the particularly self-righteous fools that only Canadians can be, we are actually being fools, led by the king of fools. And we're going to pay for it.
We are fools led by the king of fools. That's Canada now. Yeah. I mean, that's actually, it kind of sounds like a good slogan.
And so are our children and grandchildren. This government has to go, just as the truckers intimated. And the sooner
What, through force? Do you not believe in democracy anymore?
the better. And hopefully, God willing, we'll be fortunate enough to find some competent adults to lead us. Conservatives, do you have it in you? Polyev, Charest, Lewis, Bobber,
Oh, God.
Peterson.
Here we go.
Can you shake off the mob-generated guilt and consequent moral timidity that has so effectively hamstrung opponents
Oh, and Pierre is just like, yes, daddy, ooh, ooh, whatever you want.
of the pretentious idiot leftist radicals for the last 15 or 40 years and stand forthrightly for traditional values of family,
Yeah, Avengers
economy,
Assemble.
culture,
Holy shit.
and indeed environment? Can you serve as genuine guardians of the working and middle class and rich and successful entrepreneurs and businessmen for that matter, and put forward a positive and attractive vision that's more than mere reaction to the overreach of the utopian left? Conservatives, can you withstand the temptation to destroy your party with internal squabbles, or to settle in
Or-
September for a candidate that displeases no one but fails to truly satisfy anyone, as you have done much too often in the past? Rough times are coming. What
You're
with
not wrong.
the cascading consequences of energy shortage, supply chain disruption, war in Ukraine, energy, and last but by no means least, severe and looming food and fertilizer shortage. The Liberals and the NDP are gone, gone, gone into the utopian clouds. I pray we have in Canada
Gone.
something
gone.
in reserve that is better, although it is truly hard to see how anything different from what we have now could be worse.
Or oh, that is a plug for the Daily Wire. Damn. Well, that was fun. I'm glad he's keeping busy. You know, you find something that you love doing. You don't have to work a day in your life. Isn't that what they say?
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we are prepared to embark on a mighty jihad in your name. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble jester, attempting in vain to get you to laugh. To our valiant knights of the Round Table, Benji Arnie, Tech Tink, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Mayred, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood. It doesn't matter what I believe, it only matters what I can prove. Egbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Vivienne McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Jenna Tao, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevbot, EXE, Brian Ephraim, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojack, Saren 42, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Agent NDN, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our mugs and salute our brave heroes off to another glorious conquest.